The story I wanted to tell you this time was about my neighbor. His name was Lu Fang. However, we usually didn't get along well with him. One day, while my friend and I were walking on the street, my friend told me that Lu Fang was following us. I told him to ignore him and urged him to go faster. But we couldn't stand the smell of Lu Fang. No one wanted to play with him. Lu Fang's family condition was not very good. He looked a bit malnourished and his clothes were also very shabby. Although Lu Fang's house was next to mine, I didn't make friends with him for this reason. Lu Fang's house was full of paper people and paper horses all over the house. It looked so weird. In front of Lu Fang's house there was also a round wreath of flowers to invite business. It was not just Lu Fang who looked annoyed but also his mother. In the countryside at that time, almost every family kept a few chickens and pigs, and sometimes they could not avoid diseases and they would die. When pets die of disease, people often throw them in the river. When Lu Fang's mother saw someone dump an animal carcass, she would bring it home to clean it and eat it. We all guessed Lu Fang's strange body odor because of eating too many sick animals. His mother also rarely interacted with people in the village. She had a very odd temperament, so the family's paper business was not doing very well. Every time we see Lu Fang's mother, we shied away and couldn't figure out why we were so afraid of her. Once, I was walking home alone and passed in front of Lu Fang's house. I heard a commotion in his yard. If it was someone else's house, I might not care. But Lu Fang's house was different because I had never seen anyone visit his house. The noise from his yard intrigued me. I listened and wanted to go in and see. I tiptoed to Lu Fang's front door, put my ear to the door and listened to the movement in the courtyard. Beside Lu Fang's voice, I heard the voice of a girl in the yard. This thing piqued my curiosity even more. I mustered up my courage and was about to push the door open to see who was inside. I gently pushed open the door to reveal an opening and peered into the courtyard. I guessed it could be a sneaking relationship. I could feel my heart beating faster. Since the opening was not too big, I could only see a part of the courtyard. I saw Lu Fang playing ball with that girl very happily. I had rarely seen him smile so happily before. But no matter how I changed my perspective, I couldn't see the girl. The less I saw, the more worried I was because I didn't know if something shady happened here. As I was looking at the yard with my full attention, a hand suddenly was placed on my shoulder. The sudden hand almost scared the hell out of me. It was Lu Fang's mother. She yelled at me with fierce eyes and asked what I was doing in front of her house. I was so scared. Lu Fang's mother's screams made me tremble so much that my legs went limp. I sat down on the ground. Lu Fang's mother asked if I wanted to steal something from her house. She thought I was stealing things from her house, while Lu Fang's house was poor. There was nothing worth stealing. The moment she didn't notice, I immediately escaped. As I ran, I screamed in terror at what had just happened before my eyes. It was horrible. That night, I dreamt that Lu Fang's mother was chasing me. The next day after school, I told my friend about it. He laughed at me for being shy. I didn't want to let the story go. I asked my friend that night we would go to Lu Fang's house together to see which girl was playing with him. I didn't wait for my friend to agree or disagree, but I decided on this. I returned home to eat a hasty dinner, then ran to Lu Fang's door. I hid in the corner and stared at his house. My friend also came soon after. During the 2 hours we watched, no one entered Lu Fang's house. But when I was talking to my friend, there was a noise in Lu Fang's yard. I asked my friend if he could hear a girl's voice in the yard. My friend also listened carefully. In the yard, a girl was playing with Lu Fang. The two of them seemed to have had a lot of fun playing together. Their laughter seemed to tear the cold air. My friend suggested going inside to see who the girl was in the yard, but I disagreed. I was still afraid of being discovered by Lu Fang's fierce mother like yesterday. We hid in the corner and looked in. When it got dark, my friend got bored and wanted to leave. I stopped him. I waited patiently for a while, and then I heard the sound of clack, 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 clack. Someone was opening the door. I saw a girl with a red face walking out of Lu Fang's house. We didn't know if the girl was from this village or not, because she looked strange. At first, I thought someone was visiting Lu Fang. Because we wanted to know what had happened, we followed her and tried to see who she would meet. My friend and I followed her out of the village when it was dark. The friend was a bit scared, so he didn't want to follow anymore and wanted to go home. I ignored him and continued to follow the girl. I knew it was getting dark and it was dangerous to go back to the village. He didn't dare to go back alone, so he could only go on with me. I also convinced him and we talked. He pointed forward and said that the girl had gone into the forest. I saw that the girl had left the road and entered a forest on the side of the road. My friend and I ran into the forest as fast as we could for fear of losing track of that girl, because if we lost track, it seemed like we wasted all night. But when we ran into the forest, the girl was gone. While I was about to find her, I suddenly panicked at the scene before me. I was so scared that I stepped back and bumped into my friend. He was also taken aback by my actions, his voice trembling as he asked me what was wrong. At that time, we also discovered that we were chasing the girl to the cemetery. My friend burst into tears and wanted to go home immediately. I felt awe at the scene in front of me too. Just as we were about to turn around and wanted to run back, we bumped into something behind us and made a noise. In the dark and silent graveyard, the sound almost made me pee my pants. This sight made my legs weak. I didn't know when a Paperman figure was placed behind us. A Paperman was standing in front of us. We reassured ourselves by assuming that the wind had blown this Paperman here. My friend was so scared that he cried and turned to run home. I didn't dare to stay alone, so I followed him out of the cemetery. As I ran out of the graveyard, I looked at the Paperman again. This paper person looked very similar to the girl who walked out of Lu Fang's house. After many times of fear, I did not dare to continue to find out who was playing with Lu Fang. Every time I passed his house, I could still hear the noise in the yard. I didn't have the guts to find it anymore.